Anthem, we're live, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jen. So I'm going to go to each councillor in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard, and it's a legal requirement for me to do so. I will begin with members of this committee. Councillor Bartlett, Vice Chairperson, can you hear and be heard?
Good afternoon, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Splendid. Councillor Ironson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. I can see and I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price. Can you hear and see?
Afternoon, Madam Chairman. I can hear you. I can see you.
I can hear and see you. Thank you. Councillor Summers. Can you hear and see?
I can hear and see you.
Splendid. I can hear and see you. Councillor Tillett. Can you hear?
Good afternoon, Chair. I can hear and see you clearly.
Splendid. And I can hear and see you. Now, members of the executive, Councillor Crockett, Cabinet Member, Health and Adult Wellbeing, can you hear and see?
I can, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett, and I can hear and see you. Councillor Hitchener, Leader of the Council, can you hear?
I can see and hear you, thank you.
Splendid, I can hear and see you, thank you. And Councillor Felicity Norman, Cabinet Member, Children and Families, can you hear and see?
I can, thank you, Chair. Yes, see and hear.
Thank you very much. We have councillors in attendance. Councillor Gandhi, non-voting attendee, Chairperson of Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Can you hear and see?
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. I can see and hear you. Councillor Toynbee, non-voting attendee, Vice Chairperson, Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Can you hear and see?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can hear you and see you.
Thank you very much. I can hear and see you. We also have invited guests present, and I would like to check that they can hear and be heard. Mr. Ian Stead from Health Watch Herefordshire, can you hear and heard?
Yes to both, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And we are very honoured to have experts by experience present in this meeting. Kat Hornsey, who is a carer, a member of the Making It Real board. Kat, can you hear and see?
Yes, I can hear and see you.
That's lovely, thank you very much. And Barbara Millman, who's a parent carer and member of the Carers Focus Group. Barbara, can you hear and see?
Yes, Madam Chairman. I am actually an ex-carer.
Okay, thank you for the clarification and welcome to the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. We also have a number of officers present, and I will ask each person to introduce themselves when they are invited to speak during the meeting. Thank you. So welcome to this meeting of Adults and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee being held on Monday, 29th of March 2021. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making an official recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you are not speaking. If any member of the committee loses connection and it's not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as there's a quorum of committee members. When you wish to speak, please use the blue hand button, which, depending on the Zoom version you are using, is to be found either against your name in the participants list or via the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. I will then invite you to speak in order of the hands being raised. Voting will be undertaken electronically using the voting software within the virtual meeting platform. Only members of the committee may vote. At the appropriate time, non-voting attendees will be moved to a breakout room until all eligible votes have been cast. In the event that electronic voting is not possible to use or there is a technical failure, I will ask each committee member by means of a roll call to indicate if they are for, against, or are abstaining. The results of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes where there is a requirement to do so. Thank you. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The apology has been received from Councillor Selden in terms of the committee. Also in terms of invitees, Councillor Watson, Cabinet Support Member, Adults Communities, sent her apologies, as have officers Chris Baird, Paul Smith and Stephen Vickers. And finally, Dr. Ian Tate from NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire Clinical Commissioning Group has also forwarded his apologies for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Agenda item number 2, named substitutes.
Madam Chairman, sorry, if I may just add an apology.
I'm sorry,
Councillor
Councillor
Bowen.
Bowen.
About agenda 4, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen.
Yeah. And Chair, just to note that I will be needing to leave about 4:20 for another meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Have any name substitutes been notified to the clerk?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Summers is kindly attending today on behalf of Councillor Selden. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome, Councillor Summers. Thank you for substituting. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests in any agenda item? No. Agenda item number 4, minutes. The minutes of the meetings held on the 13th of January 2021 and 26th of January 2021 are included in the agenda at pages 9 to 20 for approval. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, so I will ask committee members to confirm that they agree each set of minutes in turn by electronic votes. Please can non-voting attendees be moved out of the meeting room and the number of committee members be confirmed.
Chairman, we have 7 voting members.
Thank you.
The first set of minutes should be on the screen.
So these are the minutes for the meeting held on 13th of January 2021. Committee members, please cast your vote either for, against or abstain. Please ensure you press submit after selecting the option for which you are voting.
All votes are in, Chair, and there's been 5 to approve and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. And we'll have the voting screen for the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January 2021. Councillor Ironson.
I'm terribly sorry. I was voting on the wrong meeting. I should have voted for this meeting and not the other. But I don't think it makes a difference.
Okay. What would you like to do? Do you want to go back and vote again?
Well, I said it. I voted abstain, but I should have voted abstain for this one because
Okay. Well, we'll let it stand, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we changed the numbers. That's fine with that. So
Yeah.
they're still approved, and for the first set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Paul. So if we can vote for, against, or abstain, and press submit for the minutes of the 26th of January.
Okay, all votes are in for that one, Chair, and it's 5 for and 2 abstentions on that one as well.
Thank you very much. Okay. So can we have non-voting attendees can be brought back into the meeting? Right, well, welcome back. Agenda item number 5, questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to the committee ahead of the meeting. A question has been received for this meeting from Andrea Davis on NHS continuing healthcare. And I would like to thank Ms. Davis for her question. Just hold a moment, please. Apologies for that. So I would like to thank Ms. Davis for her question. A response has been provided by NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire Clinical Commissioning Group. The question and the response have been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Questioners are provided with an opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or to send an audio or video recording or to join the meeting to ask their question live. I understand that Ms. Davis is unable to attend this afternoon, but has submitted a supplementary question as an audio file. Could I ask Democratic Services to play the supplementary question, please?
Given Herefordshire and Worcestershire CCG's assertion that CHC is an extremely complex area, and notwithstanding the lack of a comprehensive explanation on the CCG website, which is normal recognised practice, please explain how the CCG comply with the National Framework Requirement at paragraph 21 to promote awareness of NHS continuing healthcare, and to thereby ensure members of the public are fully informed of their right to a CHC checklist and assessment.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question, Ms. Davis. Unfortunately, there is nobody from the clinical commissioning group available to attend this meeting today. However, a written response to the supplementary question has been received. Could I ask Democratic Services to display the response, please?
Chair, hopefully you should see that on screen now.
Can, thank you.
Clearly, it's a response from the clinical commissioning group rather than from the council. But I'll just read it out very quickly for those that are watching online. So the response is that in line with the principles and guidance of the National Framework for NHS Continuing Healthcare and NHS-funded Nursing Care 2018, NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire CCG cases are considered individually on a case-by-case basis according to each individual's needs. Any members of the public who might be eligible for NHS Continuing Healthcare funding are provided with information to explain the process around application and assessment. This initial communication predominantly takes place through conversations with the health or social care professional who submits the referral. NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire CCG makes sure that there is ongoing communication with the patient or their representative during the process, including letters, patient information leaflets, and direct communication from the CHC nurse coordinator. The CCG has established the CHC communications group that meets monthly and which is attended by patient representatives, care group representatives, Health Watch, local authority officers, CHC managers, the CCG patient liaison manager, and the CCG communications manager. This group is focused on all communication aspects of CHC, including wider promotion to members of the public. Most recently, this group reviewed all patient information provided by letter and leaflet to ensure they were clear, understandable, and accessible. The CHC Communications Group is currently working on the CHC webpage that will provide more general information about CHC. This will be complete by the end of April 2021. So I'll just leave that up just for a second more and just stop sharing that so that you can return to the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ball. Members of the committee will recall that some time ago, indeed, that the committee requested a briefing note on NHS continuing healthcare. And at page 69 of today's agenda, you will see that it was agreed that with regard to the CHC position and the previous request from scrutiny to be kept informed on CHC outcomes for Herefordshire citizens, the local authority will request an analysis of the CHC and joint funded position in Herefordshire from the CCG. Herefordshire Council will also contribute a report to support the understanding of the committee. So could I request that this analysis and report be provided by the end of April 2021 and be published on the webpage for this meeting? I realise that our colleagues in the health have had enormous pressures, and I think we all acknowledge that. However, this has been quite a long-running request, and I would like to see that the recommendations of that scrutiny are responded to so that we can close that off, or we will have to consider another scrutiny. In addition to the question and supplementary, Ms. Davis emailed members of the committee with a paper containing further observations. And could I also request that the analysis and report addresses the questions raised in Ms. Davis's correspondence so that she has a full and comprehensive reply to her queries and concerns. Is there anything that Mandy Appleby, who's the Assistant Director, Adult Social Care Operations, would wish to add at this point?
Hello, this is Mandy Appleby speaking. I think that what I would add is I would agree that you've included the request for Herefordshire Council to be included in providing that report. So I can confirm that we would absolutely work with CCG to do that. I think we are working very closely with the CCG at the moment. Obviously, some of those offices are new with the new Herefordshire and Worcester CCG to ensure that we have got close working practices and processes over what is absolutely a very complex arena in trying to establish and work consistently around the CCG CHC national CHC framework, and we will continue to do that. So I would support your request there for a joint report.
Thank you very much. So agenda item number 6, questions from councillors. Councillor Summers, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just question from Mandy, why is it taking so long? CCG in Herefordshire and Worcester have been one for quite a long time now. It's over a year.
So
I'm afraid it is a little bit slow, and it's also holding up the mental health aspect of it because of that. So I'm really interested in knowing when we can get a little more coordination between us and CCG. Thank you.
There is quite a significant amount of work being undertaken now with the CCG. I think it's fair to say that because CCG with the local government COVID requirements stepped out of doing CHC work as we know it through the COVID period, only finishing that process in March. Or we've just finished actually that all that restorative work at the now in the last week. It's only now that we're really in the last say month getting back to those close working practices within our national within the CHC framework and within the Care Act, as both the governments enabled us through the potential easements, as well as stepping out ensuring that the CHC could redeploy their workforce for the benefits of the wider health and social care system. So whilst I can't talk completely for CCG, who are not here today, I can say that certainly is a reason why we haven't been able to work so closely with them on those processes. But it is now a question of full steam ahead.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor Tillett, which I will allow, but please bear in mind this is actually a public question segment of the agenda and not a scrutiny segment of the agenda.
I'm grateful, Chair, and I intended to hop in at the end of the written question section, but I was too slow. And that is just to make the general point. You know, Ms. Davis has been incredibly assiduous with her pursuing of this matter, and given the detailed nature of her query and its supplementary, I think it is regrettable that the CCG cannot send anyone, even if it is to attend only for the first 20 minutes, to address her concerns, particularly when, as I say, her questions are very detailed. Her knowledge, I suspect, surpasses any of ours, or possibly all of ours collectively. And yet the answers that come back repeatedly from the CCGA are of the most generalized and vague nature, almost, dare one say, almost obfuscating. I'm sure that's not their intention, but when someone is giving such specific, detailed criticism and raising such specific and detailed questions, I think the very least they and we can expect is a detailed response. She is not asking about individual cases, but she is giving very specific criticism and questions. And I think it's about time some of those got answered in an equal amount of detail and specificity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tillett. So agenda item number 6, questions from councillors. No questions have been received from councillors. Agenda item number 7, carer strategy. The purpose of this item is to consider the draft carer strategy for 2021 to 2026. Can I invite Ewan Archibald, Head of Community Commissioning and Resources, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Yes, so what's before you is an early first draft of a potential new carer strategy for Herefordshire. this is due to be, or the final version of a strategy is due to be considered by Cabinet for the Council in September this year. So this is the first opportunity for scrutiny members to shape it. Subsequently, a further draft will go to the Health and Wellbeing Board in order to consult that group about the strategy. In between then and after then, and before it goes to Cabinet, we will continue the already extensive engagement that's been undertaken with carers, people with direct experience of caring, and also with wider stakeholders. So that engagement continues into the summer to support what I hope will be a good final version of the care strategy. So it is important to think of this document as a first and early draft, and there is plenty of opportunity for it to be shaped, including by this committee. Also accompanying the strategy, obviously, is a brief covering report, which just draws attention to some of the key issues, and also a brief document which summarises the progress that was made in relation to the previous and still current strategy, which expires during this year and was established and adopted by the Council and the CCG in 2021. So to a degree, there are some elements of that old strategy which continued in the proposals for the new strategy, but in large part, the new strategy breaks new ground or places different emphasis in the content of the strategy, and particularly the main parts of the content are the 5 priorities proposed, and also some cross-cutting themes, and those are supported by some contextual information within the document. It's important to underline that basically all of that key content, so all of those 5 priorities and the cross-cutting themes, have emerged pretty much entirely from the feedback and the contributions of carers and other stakeholders with whom we've engaged. None of that content has been designed by the Council or has come from anywhere else. It's all coming from the views of carers themselves and other interested stakeholder organisations. There is an outline action plan to the rear of the document, which summarises the key actions proposed under each of the priorities. Clearly, at this point, that action plan is not fully complete. By the time the strategy goes to Cabinet, that will be more complete when we can be certain about timescales and who will be leading on certain elements and where those actions have been finalised. Sum up, I think, early draft, plenty of opportunity to influence it. Very keen to hear the thoughts and views of committee and others attending on how we can develop the strategy further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Archibald. And is there anything that Mandy Appleby would wish to add at this point?
Sorry, not from my perspective. I think that covers the council position well.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to turn to our experts by experience and Health Watch. I'll start with Kat Hornsey. Kat, is there anything that you would like to say about this strategy at this point?
I'm going first, so I'm not quite sure what everybody else is going to be saying. I'm actually the parent carer person. I'm a parent carer myself, and I also belong to, I'm part of the steering group for Parent Carer Voice Herefordshire. So we represent the voice of parents in our area. I feel that parent carers are not represented enough. And hopefully this document will go a long way to helping that once it is completed. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what else to say, so I'm happy to take any questions as and when.
Okay, thank you. You also have an opportunity to come back in after the debate if there's anything that you feel that we're not picked up on, or that you feel we should explore more. So that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Barbara Millman, would you have any comments to make at this stage?
The only one thing which sort of jumped out at me was that there doesn't seem to be anything to help coordinate between the services, because you may have the carer may have an award of a carer's service, but the person that they're caring for may not necessarily. have or be able to have care for the time that they are wanting to use their time. You can't always coordinate the fact that the person that you're looking after is doing something else, or somebody else is looking after them, when you want to be able to take advantage of the break for yourself. And unfortunately, my experience, probably about 3 years ago, was that that I was awarded a certain amount of money to choose what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, the only offer of help for my husband at the time that I would be out was some technology. But because he had dementia, he wasn't able to understand when a smoke alarm was going off, or when something like that, or if he had a fall, he didn't press his alarm because he just had totally forgotten that that is what you had the alarm for. So I really think that there needs to be a little bit of coordinated thinking somewhere to help in those situations.
Yes, thank you. So there's something around kind of appropriateness of an offered solution that's specific to the needs of the client.
Yes, I mean, I know it must be very difficult because the carer service can't provide that cover for the person being looked after, but it's the liaison perhaps somewhere there, and perhaps the understanding from the person doing the assessment that that it needs to coordinate with the carer's assessment.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Health Watch Herefordshire, Ian said.
Thank you, Councillor Singlehurst. First of all, I've got to say we were pleased to see the strategy because it is fairly comprehensive. Particularly, we like the idea of setting up formal arrangements to hear the voice of carers. You know, it suggests establishing a carers partnership board, and I think that is a very good suggestion, because I think often carers find it very difficult to get their voice heard because they're in quite a vulnerable position and they're extremely busy with their role in lives, and so something that would have an establishment for this voice to be picked up is very positive. Certainly carers need support, and for a while I was a volunteer for Herefordshire Carers Support, looking at child carers, young people carers, and similar issues there: lack of support, feeling very isolated, and single points of contact to get information that's required, because there are so many bits of information that they need, right across the board in terms of physical support, financial arrangements. Respite care is a critical issue that needs support. Somewhere for them to meet other carers, you know, gives a huge amount of support, that to find out I'm not the only one in this position with the same anxieties and same problems. And so, you know, it's a very broad thing. And again, I'm sure that Ewan would agree with this, that there's a strong link to talk community, because it may be that good, strong local community arrangements is a helpful way to find out who the carers are, because that isn't always easy, and I know that they're not always all picked up, and the local community may well have this kind of information. So I think it's worth looking at how talk community can be adapted to do that. But as a whole, we felt that it was a positive move, and that there were some very good points in the strategy.
Thank you. Mandy Appleby.
Thank you, Chairman. I really wanted to say, from an operational perspective, an adult social care operational perspective, that just before COVID last year, we altered our pathway to really modernise it for carers, to reflect the equal rights of carers to individuals that need their own support. And we aligned it to strengths-based practice. And as part of that, just as with anyone who receives an assessment through the Care Act, absolutely they are linked into our community brokers, who are in turn linked into the community and resources. Now, it's fair to say that over the last year, if the isolation of carers has been a significant concern for us all over this period. Already, people who may feel disenfranchised from community and community support, it must have been so much worse through this period. And so it is with those thoughts that we're absolutely concentrating on ensuring that we review those carers that and the carer support over the forthcoming year as quickly as we can, and that absolutely everybody who we can facilitate utilising talk community options, but as well as through formal services where necessary, we will be doing so.
Thank you very much. Right, so I'll lead off the debate, and then I'll turn to my vice chair, and then invite councillors Gandy and Toynbee before opening up to the rest of the committee for debate. I think it's very good, this strategy. I like the direction of travel, the sort of continuity of the philosophy of the strengths-based approach, which is so good. The clearly extensive engagement, really important to get that into the strategy, and that's really good to see. And I agree that the partnership board for the life of the strategy is a very, very welcome development indeed, to keep the voice of the carer in through the delivery of the strategy. It's always seemed to me that there's a massive challenge around identification and self-identification of carers, and this is, I'm very pleased to see recognised. It's front and centre in the strategy, because that issue, that challenge of kind of invisibility, is something that's and if you can't overcome that, you haven't even got a toe in the door, have you? So it's absolutely essential, and it's fully recognised. And I would like to just say, I think that's excellent. But there's, and I'd be interested to see, I suppose, as the strategy develops, so obviously it's a draft, how many avenues of contacts, as it were, making every contact count in order to discover where carers might be, how many different avenues might be explored, whether it's kind of through AA, NA, Macmillan, other partners that we work with, in order to get a sense of the scope. I can see Mr. Archibald is wishing to come in, so I'm going to ramble a little bit longer and hope that we can pick up on the points as they come through. One thing that I'm interested in is that there's a difference, and potentially there should be a difference in approach, maybe, between long-term care carers, who I feel a lot of the strategy is directed and shaped around, and what I might call crisis carers. So people who are just sort of going about normal life, all of a sudden their spouse, their partner, the person that has got a terminal diagnosis or has had a massive stroke, and all of a sudden they're pitched into this world from a standing start. And it can be very disorienting and very traumatic and very difficult to deal with, particularly if it's an end of life situation where you're trying to care for somebody at home. And maybe we need to consider specific approaches in terms of those urgent crisis cases where someone has no idea about any of this and is suddenly, pitched in to a difficult situation. I'm very much in favour of the single access point, because I think actually, for people like that who from a standing start have kind of fallen to have multiple access points and multiple people to talk to, it's very confusing. Particularly if you live on the Welsh borders, then you really are confused. But the single access point is really, really useful. And I was talking to one of my local community groups yesterday to get a sense of how they viewed their experience of being community carers, as it were, falling into that role in some respect. And that was the point they made. Single point of access would be really, really good, as long as it then has a smooth escalation into the rest of the processes and doesn't kind of keep stalling, because their experience has been that they've had to escalate themselves, and it doesn't, and then you sort of lose the thread over who's doing what and the best way forward. So if that's all joined up and particularly if you get somebody coming from a community group that, as it were, take it as read that they have a degree of already involvement and therefore their request is not something to try to sort of do the least, but you just kind of immediately accelerate it into processes and get people engaged with them, so that they're not seeking engagement, as it were, which would seem to be the experience. I was wondering again around those community groups that aren't talk community, but are just sort of community groups, particularly that have happened around COVID, that we've had a number of these groups turning up, and whether there'd be some point in giving them a degree of some training, not necessarily about practical how to be a carer, but rather mapping of what services are available and how to access them. That sort of information might be a useful thing, I thought. Right, so I'm going to stop now, and Mr. Archibald, I think, will probably come back.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly didn't wish to interrupt your flow, Councillor. Just picking up a couple of the points that have been made before you continue. So first on that, the last point you were just making around single points of access. I think that there will always need to be a separate point of access for adult social care through the front door in terms of any assessments, both of the cared for person and the carer, but those are ever more and will continue to be more and more connected to other routes for information and signposting, both within the council and further afield. I think through the experience of the talk community, I think during the COVID emergency in particular, we're seeing the joining up of those some of those elements you mentioned to a much greater degree. You may know there will shortly be a sort of representation of the brand and the concept of talk community, and that will now encompass what is currently WISH going forward. So there'll be a much greater alignment of those various sources of information, advice and signposting, both within the council and more broadly, which I think will support carers. But we're certainly very conscious of one of the key findings of the engagement, that people want more clearly promoted and pointed to trusted source of information. I think those sources exist, but they need to be more clearly identified for carers, and even more work. There's quite a lot of work being done during the current strategy around improving and diversifying the information and signposting for carers, but that can still be improved, and people understanding where to go and how to access that. There've been further feedback on that, and I think we take very serious note of that. Just in relation to the identification, just to say that the work that we've been doing in the last few weeks in relation to vaccination for carers under the National Vaccination Programme, I think has helped shed light on the overall kind of distribution of carers, perhaps on our overall numbers of carers with a significant caring role, and of what services they're in contact with. I think has been really quite interesting. So we now are clear that there are a minimum of about 7,700 carers who are flagged on GP patient lists as carers. We've been communicating with about 2,500, nearly 2,500 carers known to adult social care and children's social care in the last 3 years, but we know there's a lot of overlap with those 7,500 within GPs. And we're also been finding out more about how many carers link with what networks because of the work we've been doing to get the word out for carers in relation to vaccination. So I think it's been quite revealing about those numbers. And I think, we're confident that the numbers of carers with significant, with a significant caring role is in and around that sort of 9 to 11,000 kind of number overall. But obviously identifying individual carers is a different matter. And as you said, where people are suddenly thrust into the role of caring, that is even more difficult than generally for those carers to know how to identify themselves and get the support quickly enough and in the right ways to match the suddenness of that experience. So that's a point well made. And you're right that a lot of carers strategy thinking, not just this document, tends to focus on those who go a long journey in their caring. While there is focus on crisis, that sort of suddenness of becoming a carer is probably not addressed enough. So we will reflect on that.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Kat Hornsey, do you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say on the subject of single point of contact of parent carers, that's incredibly difficult because we actually span, parent carer spans the age group. We care for our children from 0 to 25, literally to the day before the 26th birthday, roughly in line with an education and healthcare plan that would exist for the same amount of time. So, we're having to, as carers, we deal with children's as well as adult social care. Obviously, we've got the education side of it as well as the health and social care that would go alongside any other care as well. So it's really, really important that anybody that's helping parent carers really know all those bits and pieces and all the other organisations that we need to still be in contact with. SENDIAS, for helping with all the educational bits, that's not something that somebody else could do for us. We talk communities would have to still, or any single point would still have to refer parent carers to quite a wide range of other organisations. So it's very, very difficult to do that. So I was just making little notes as I was doing that.
Thank you very much. It's a good point, well made. Mandy Appleby.
Thank you. I really wanted to just add to that point. I think there's something about thinking about children's pathways of no wrong door. I think for carers there is something to be said for no wrong door. So whether it's a crisis situation or a young or a child that is a carer or whoever that is across that caring spectrum, that whatever avenues that they choose to reach in, that there is a cognizance about ensuring that the offer, what is the offer of the council and beyond, is there for them. I think part of that work, certainly through the operational pathways that we have with Y Valley and CCG and GPs around urgent care, we made sure over the COVID period that carers were central to that. It wasn't just about the service user, but that their needs were taken into account through any hospital avoidance care packages or discharges from hospital, as an example.
Thank you. Now I'm going to turn to my Vice Chair, Councillor Bartlett, for comments.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone who's contributed to this. It is a draft strategy at the moment, and I'm really pleased to see it here. And thank you for everyone who's worked on it. And it's really good to see how much engagement's already happening, as well as has happened and is ongoing. I think the 5 priorities are excellent. They seem to encompass everything: the carer's voice, carer in the community, services offered to carers' wellbeing and financial stability for carers. One of the things that one of the newer things that we're doing now, I think is very good. That we've got a whole system strategy, and that it's being owned by all of our partners, really. So that's good, and that we going forward, we've actually got some sense of who we're working with. So a couple of questions that I've got around some of the issues that I've been looking at in this report. So certainly in terms of the parts of the report that talk about carers who are working or accessing, need to access the DWP, there's a couple of little warning bells that go off in my mind. It's about the idea that maybe not everybody understands the pressure that carers are under if they're trying to care and hold down a job. Particularly worried on page 49 when it talks about the DWP appointments. So is there something where we can work more closely with DWP to try and influence them to be a little bit more holistic? In terms of working with our partners and being more aware ourselves of our own employees who may be carers at the same time, that's really, really good. And I'm just wondering whether that should be extended to encompass our partners like BBLP, which doesn't seem to be specifically here, whether they have an awareness and a strategy for supporting carers. But also, we've got the business board, we've got the hub, we've got the LEP, and presumably there should be some kind of work with those organisations to make sure that people are working and are caring, they can manage that work-life balance really well. And just a couple of other questions I wanted to ask, and I know Ewan and I have talked about the action plan before, but I just wondered, Mr. Archibald, if you could just clarify the grey boxes in the action plan as to the ones that haven't been either green, amber or red aligned yet. So that was one of the other questions. And my final observation at this point is on page 50 when it talks about some of the local facts and highlights. So there's a block about the young carers and how many of the young carers who completed the survey who stated they have free school meals. Seemed to me incredibly high and worryingly so. And this might be, I don't know why this might be, but looking at the first block of statistics of the 64 that responded, I just wondered in terms of the demographics of those carers, whether they also were trying to juggle caring whilst either having to, claim benefits or and also have underlying problems themselves. So in terms of who is caring for who, how much are they struggling with other things as well? So I just wondered whether that would an understanding of that would help or not. So thank you.
Are you happy for me to answer a couple of those?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Archibald.
So thank you. So on the young carer point, first of all, this was people who were easy to engage with amongst that group and who sort of came forward or were persuaded to come forward. So it isn't necessarily representative of all young carers. I have to say, I don't think it's very surprising that you would have a very high level of free school meals eligibility in that group. And there is a sense in which we can find it reassuring, because we know that any family, including a young carer in a significant caring role, that there is significant frailty and vulnerability around that family. And that young person is likely to be at risk in a range of circumstances. And therefore, the fact that they're getting access to some of the forms of support that are available is in a sense reassuring, but it does underline, you're quite right, Councillor, it underlines the level of vulnerability that those carers and the families they're in very often are experiencing. I don't think this is something that is captured in all of the wider national, needs analysis around young carers. So I'm not sure if that percentage would be reflected consistently nationally, but it is high, you're right, and I think it tells us something about the nature of that group. Sorry, I've forgotten your earlier question, Councillor. I do apologise.
The two main questions. One was about the action plan and the allocated colours, and the other was widening our partnership working as such, if you want to call that, to incorporate BBLP, how we influence the DWP, and whether or not we should be working with the business board and the LEP to enable employers to understand employees' pressures.
Thank you. So I certainly think that in regard to business partners, I think the LEP and other partners, I think we should explore. It is the intention, as you'll see from the strategy, to stimulate partners to get engaged in the issues from an employer perspective, and for those to be, for our new partnership board to have the opportunity to have some dialogue and offer challenge and support to employers who are interested in being more care aware and supportive of that part of their workforce. I think we will certainly try and get it on the agenda of business board and of LEP and see, if we can have success there. Certainly the plan is to engage through a variety of networks, employers in the discussion. In relation to DWP, so we have identified that there was some hesitation, and I welcome the committee's comments on this. The financial stability issue emerged as a key element of in the engagement, but the question was raised as to should we have it as a priority in the local strategy, because how much can we as local partners influence those issues? Because although employment issues are relevant, as we've mentioned, a lot of the issues affecting finances of carers are national, so the taxation system, the benefit system and so on. But it has been included, and welcome comments on that and its content. It isn't the easiest thing, I think, for local partners to engage with DWP on the carers issues, for instance, like carers allowance or other ways in which the benefit system deals with carers, because in our experience, those things are managed at a national level. In that case, they're managed from Belfast, I think, carers allowance. So we will be engaging with DWP locally, with local managers, to see the extent to which they feel they can be involved and the extent to which we can try and influence and shape the offer for people locally. I think that there may be some challenges in doing that, but we're certainly keen to do so. Just on the colour coding, I think there has been a degree of misunderstanding there, and it arises from the choice of colours. It's not actually RAG rating, Councillor. It's just the shading of each priorities group of actions in a different way in order to delineate them. So they're not meant to denote RAG rating in any way. They're just dividing up the priorities. And I think it's led to slight confusion, so apologies for that. Obviously, the strategy documents, when it's published, will be published in a number of formats later in the autumn. It'll be represented anyway. So we'll give thought to how the action plan is best delineated and made clear. So sorry about that. That's that there's no colour coding at this, no RAG rating at this point on the document.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Councillor Gandhi.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome the report and the strategy, and I certainly support the 5 principles. I also agree with what Kat said, that for young people and children who are carers, young people who are caring for young children and under 25s, you can't have a single point of access. That's just not possible. And so I thoroughly, absolutely agree with what she's saying. With regard, I think my concerns really are around the fact that the number of young people and children who are actually acting as carers, we probably just do not know, and we probably will never know. I think being a young carer is particularly lonely, and I think for some to sort of lose your childhood and lose your teenage experience must be very difficult. And whatever we do to make up for that for us is very difficult. I think for one of the things about I'm interested to know is how we identify young carers. Do GP practices just pick them up through dealing with the person that they're caring for, and or do social workers, because schools will not necessarily know. And I have a significant concern that we may have young people out there caring for a parent who wants to make sure that nobody actually knows that they're having to be cared for, because they're worried that the authorities may come in and put all sorts of restrictions upon them, and possibly even look at taking them into care. And so I do feel that we've probably, from the point of view of young carers, we've probably only got the tip of the iceberg here, and that we really don't know. And I know that it says in the report, I think on page 45, the fact that where we have identified carers, there would be an annual check on the situation, but of course that probably will exclude, you know, some people as young as sort of 8 or 9 that are caring for a mother or whatever, and they're just completely under our radar.
Can I answer that a little, Councillor? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
So, thank you, Councillor Gandhi. I'm sure I agree with you that fundamentally we will never be able to know with any confidence the exact number of young carers in our communities as in other parts of the country. What I can offer reassurance on is that during the life of the current soon to expire strategy, there's been there's been increased investment in services to support young carers. A lot of that is focused on identifying them and then supporting them. So I haven't actually got with me, unfortunately, up-to-date numbers for those in contact with the various services, including our own in-house service. But we know that there's a lot more work and support going on for young carers than ever there was. I'm confident that we now can identify a larger number of young carers than previously. While schools are a key point of identification, they are certainly not the only route that we rely on, and I know that GPs are another key route, but it also may well be through referrals from other services, community health services, for example, mental health services. I think they all contribute to our identifying of young carers. Some of that will be through interaction with the young person, some of it through visiting the home or supporting the disabled family member who the young carer is supporting. And whilst certainly can't rule out the possibility you mentioned that a parent or the person being cared for may be very reluctant for their carer to be identified, I think that potentially in some cases will indicate that there is a safeguarding issue, and in a range of circumstances we'd hope and expect that the young carer will be identified through one route or another. And certainly there's a commitment to continuing at least the existing level of resourcing around young carers, as well as the in-house service delivered through children's services through our family support functions. The council has also made over the years grant available, which has been taken up by I think 3 different voluntary organisations providing support and networking groups for young carers, and that most of that's continued in some form during the COVID-19 emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. So, Councillor Toynbee, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for the draft strategy. And I agree with what Councillor Gandhi said about young carers. And my question is a bit broader than children and young people, but obviously it's all connected. I've just got a couple of questions about priority 2, support for carers. So we buy a carers service from an organisation called Crossroads Together, which is which provides us with things like a single point of access for support. It's supposed to connect carers with each other, etc. So I'd like to know how much we pay Crossroads for this service and where we can find a list of exactly what services it provides. And if we've evaluated it, if we're evaluating it, if we've had a service user evaluation of it, just to ensure that they're providing us with what we need. And if we think that that demand might change in the context of how we're developing WISH and talk community brokers, our growing links with voluntary organisations, local charities, the coming on stream of ICS and everything like that, presumably the needs will be changing as well. So I just want a bit of reassurance about evaluation and plans for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. It's important to clarify that that service is the one that we commissioned specifically for carers, but it isn't, and whilst there's a single point in terms of, providing signposting to carers, the service is not designed to meet all of the needs of carers in any way. It is predominantly focused on signposting, advice, support around planning for emergencies and crisis, and the provision of training opportunities, a range of other things. And it is organised on a locality basis with locality coordinators patched to primary care networks to increase the or maximise the local knowledge and the linking and providing of support and signposting locally. So it certainly isn't a one-stop shop for everything a carer might conceivably need. It doesn't do carers assessments under the Care Act, for example. It can't provide access to adult or children's social care directly. So just to clarify that, and I can write separately to the council, confirm the value, but it's in the region of £160,000 in a year. The contract we're close to being halfway through that contract period. And so there is a range of monitoring of performance built into that contract, as in all our commissioned services, and part of that includes a periodical examination of individual cases and engaging directly with those people who've been receiving services, in this case carers. So there is a process within that performance monitoring where we talk to people who've been receiving services and have been in contact with the service. So that forms part of an ongoing evaluation, as you put it. I think your point about the changing environment requiring some review of the wider sort of provision for carers is a good one. There isn't a formal process in place for that, but I think particularly with some of the changes going on in relation to talk community and that evolution, also in the light of COVID, and also with some changes expected around WISH, I think it's a good challenge, and we'll certainly look into that and happy to confirm to you the approach that we can take to addressing that point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I've been around long enough to have been involved in carer strategy from a very long time ago, when we were in the happy palace of Brockington even. Happy days indeed, considering what's happened to Shire Hall and other places since then. Yeah, and I think we've done a good job here. I think there's a lot of very good stuff going on, and it reminds me that many carers certainly didn't see themselves as carers, and they therefore missed out quite a lot. And I hope we never let that happen, really. And potentially young carers in particular, I think, are not always recognized for the job they are doing. They probably don't recognize they're being carers themselves very often, I think. I do believe it's better now, but we need to make sure that it still carries on, I think. A simple and single point of access, if possible, I think is important, and that the relevant professionals know who the carers are round about them, as you might say, and who is in their orbit. And schools, doctors obviously come very much to mind, but there are other agencies involved as well, I think. And I think an opportunity for the carers to get together, discuss their problems, and for young carers, let alone old carers, to do the same too. It's very important, I think, that young carers have the chance to be children, young adults, or whatever. They're very often very burdened with what they're doing. And I think it's important they should sometimes be given free rein to be children, be young people, and feel they have the chance on a regular basis, perhaps, to get together or even on their own and just do what they need to do, what they want to do. But I do recommend this, and I think it's a good way ahead, and I thoroughly support this, and I hope, well, obviously it's a stage, a stepping stone, but let's hope that it is one that will carry on producing good results for our carers, old and young, and consequently for the people being cared for as well. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. And actually, yes, that last thing that you said is sort of struck a chord with one of the quotes, and I love those, by the way. The quotes, the voice of the carer quotes that you've got running through the strategy, really good. But there was somebody said something. You cannot separate the cared for from the unpaid carer, and that really struck a chord. I thought that was such a good point to make, as it were, that you know, I think, and particularly when we're talking over respite care, sometimes that can be quite challenging. So, you know, who exactly are we trying to give the respite to? So anyway, Councillor Ironson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think strategy is, the wording is very good. It's very clear to read, which is great. I would see how hard it is being a parent carer. It's really extraordinarily difficult, and we should put a lot around that. And also for the young carers, I mean, I can only say that No Wrong Door does a fantastic job, and for young carers to have their network and be able to contact each other is fantastic. But in the part that says who is the strategy for, Liz, you highlight the quote, things are balloons. And I'm just looking at one here which says, I am retired and live in the countryside. My elderly neighbour does not have any family nearby. They're quite frail and have had some falls. They also get lonely. I get their shopping for them and pop in to say hello when I deliver, though COVID has made this difficult. They have an emergency alarm. I'm the first point of contact. They have an emergency like a fall. Now, that's not, I think that's a good neighbour, isn't it? It's not, doesn't fall into carer category, and because we don't want to dilute the difficulties that real carers have, and also the other thing I would say was this. My mother cared for my father who had Alzheimer's, and she would have never considered herself as a carer. You know, she was his wife, but she would never ever go to somebody for help as a carer. And I have somebody who a lovely person who rings at about 9:45 every other morning, maybe. I know who it's going to be. She rings to chat. Well, because she has her husband has got dementia and has become like a child, and she is obviously looking after him at home. She has one arm, and the help she's been given is they said she could join a support group. Well, actually, she says it's the last thing she wants to do is join a support group and listen to other people with their problems. You know, she has enough. She is not quite aware of the right place to go because she doesn't really consider herself a carer either. She is also, as my mother was, she considers herself a wife. It is difficult. But thank you very much for this. And
thank you, Councillor Ironson. Mr. Archibald.
Thank you, Councillor. I was just going to come back on the Councillor's very interesting point about where's the boundary between good neighbourly, you know, support for somebody and caring. And I think it is a very interesting point. And I think that particular quote's been included to reflect, you know, the diversity in which people see this issue. So, for instance, if you look at, we've often in the past, the system, have quoted the number of carers in Herefordshire as being approximately 21 to 22,000 people, which is an awful lot in a population of our size. This is based on the census, and the census question, if you've already completed your census this year, has evolved slightly and now carries a bit more detail underneath that than it previously did. But the data that produces that number of 21 to 22,000 asks people whether they carry out a caring role for 1 hour or more a week. And I think that that aligns perhaps to the good neighbour role that Councillor Jansen is referring to. And I think we have some sympathy with the distinction between those two, but I think recognising that the role of voluntary neighbourhood carers like that is an important one, and it is part of the talk community concept very obviously, and it contributes to people remaining independent and supporting the quality of their life. I think it is important to distinguish between them and the role of people who provide very large, many hours of care a day and a week, which is often 35, 50 or more hours a week in a number of cases. So I think we need to recognise both those roles and the gradients between them. But I think many would have sympathy with the point that Councillor Jansen is making, but we're trying to reflect a diversity of roles in the strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. It is a very diverse group that we're talking about here. Councillor Tillett.
Thank you, Chair. Many of us, currently visible on the screen, met only a few days ago to discuss the integrated care system. And it may be that was still very, very fresh in my mind when I started to go through the paperwork for today's meeting. But it struck me quite early on that we almost need an integrated carers system to mirror, to act in parallel. Because reading through the report, which is excellent, but there are recurring themes, some of which have already been mentioned by others this afternoon, about the need for single points of access, for people having full knowledge of what's going on. Several times it mentions lack of carers assessments, or even knowing that carers assessments exist. Many carers do not know what their rights are or how to find information about what these may be. And so on. And particularly for many carers, time is one of their greatest issues. If they're trying to work, care for the kids, and have a caring role, etc., then jumping endless endless hoops and over obstacles is often not an option. There are also other issues about accessibility to IT, even things like sight and hearing issues, all of which seem to make it harder. And so it is that need to have an integrated carers system. And in fact, initially I'd written down, how does ICS relate to carers? And then I thought, no, come on, Kevin, these are two separate things, although they could easily run in a very sort of parallel way. But then actually, I think there is part of this that we should be throwing back to the CCG. I think when we discussed ICS last week, I don't remember carers being mentioned at all. And that's not a criticism, it just wasn't mentioned. But then you read one of the anecdotes, the one on page 10, where the health service, in whatever manifestation it was, would not allow the carer and the cared for to have their flu vaccinations at the same time, therefore needing two journeys, one for the carer and one for the cared for person. I mean, that seems absurd to the point of almost being offensive when in every possibility it would be difficult to have one journey out to the practice, let alone to have to make two. So I would hope that we could throw an element of this back to the CCG and say, where within integrated care do carers fit, and what role can integrated care provide for them to help some of these issues? But as I say, above all, it does seem to me this need to integrate. I realise a single point of access isn't always appropriate. Kat's point was very valid, but we've got to make it simpler for people, and not place so many obstacles in some of their paths. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tillett. Some very good points there. And if we can have a little think about the point that Councillor Tillett has raised around the integrated care, and because it's true to say the white paper seems oblivious to unpaid carers and the role that they play in this. So perhaps there's something that we might suggest in terms of the inclusion going forward locally.
Yes, if I can just come in there, Councillor, I think it's a very good point about the ICS. I think creating an integrated system for carers is quite difficult in isolation, but I think, and I think there are examples of that becoming more the case, or working more than in the past. Certainly over the last 4 years under the current strategy, we've seen significant progress made by Wye Valley Trust in the way that they identify and work with carers. The already good work that was being done in Mental Health Trust, with the service having moved now to a different organisation, we think we're seeing that continue, some good practice in relation to carers, not dissimilar to the work that's evolved with Wye Valley. But I think the challenge around a integrated care system and the role of those commissioning and developing health services to properly consider what impact these have on family and unpaid carers is a very strong point. I think we can perhaps support a new partnership board for carers to offer some challenge and be a critical friend to the ICS process as it unfolds. We're also involved in the development of the Mental Health Community Collaborative, which is a kind of almost ICS system within a system focused on mental health services. And I know that Mandy and I and others will ensure that there's proper consideration of carers within that context as well.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So I think there's maybe some a recommendation around that that we can work up. It seems an important area that we could get some detail on. Okay, we have Ian Stead from Healthwatch, and then Councillor Summers, and then Councillor Bowen.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was just to follow on from the ICS to clarify that last year the STP, as it was then, did adopt a commitment to carers that was pushed for by the voluntary sector in both Herefordshire and Worcestershire. I don't think it's yet formally part of the integrated care system, but I think the plan is that it will become that. And then I think it's important to find out how that actually works in practice.
Thank you. Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Chair. For me, the partnership board is great. I'm looking forward to seeing it working. Most of my stuff has been mentioned already by both Councillor Gandy and Councillor Bartlett. I think one thing about the young carers we tend to not think about sometimes is they don't know their carers. They think they're just doing what they're supposed to do. And that's a major issue. But the problem that comes with it, and you're talking to a young carer, I think I started caring when I was 4 or 5, believe it or not, in Hallow, Worcester. There's a lot of guilt attached to it, especially when you're around that age. If you don't think you're doing well enough, or the parent that's sick, it gets angry, you tend to feel that. So you carry that through the rest of your life, by the way. So it's something that I'm mostly concerned about is those young people that don't know their carers, but are carers. And I think they need to be recognized somehow, whether it's in daycare or et cetera, et cetera. But it is a big deal, because if you feel guilty at 4 and 5 years old and 8 years old, you're going to carry that for the rest of your life. So that is my major concern, and I noticed that Councillor Gandy and Councillor Bartlett raised it, and I'm happy they did. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. Councillor Bowen.
Madam Chairman, my apologies. I have to leave for another meeting, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Pleasure. An interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Kat Hornsey.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to point out young carers don't always necessarily look after their parents or other older family members. Young carers can also relate to those helping to look after younger siblings as well.
Thank you. Very true. Thank you. I'd like, if I may, just to explore a little bit further the point that I raised earlier about crisis carers, if I can call it that. But yeah, these people who have, and particularly end of life crisis carers, because then you're dealing with a colossal amount of stuff in a very short, can be a very short time span. And I speak, as it were, as an expert by experience. I cared for my mother, and from diagnosis to death was 3 months. So it's an extremely compressed period of scrabbling about, trying to understand systems that I'd never encountered before, trying to figure out who to talk to, how to get stuff, whether it's on the Welsh side or the English side, and and always playing kind of catch up with the illness. And so that's what leads me to say that there are actually specific needs surrounding carers in that circumstance, which would have to also incorporate. I mean, I don't want to sound maudlin, but in a sense, I just speaking personally, I found that I was desperately rushing about trying to get everything organized, and I didn't actually have time to prepare for what was going to happen. So that kind of, I just felt like I was kind of falling over myself all the time. So kind of emotional support and time to prepare, or at least to have a conversation around it, as well as really kind of practical things like stair lifts and stuff like that. So I do think that this is an element that I would like to see a bit more of in this plan, if that's at all possible. Mandy.
I just wanted to agree with you, Madam Chairman. I think end of life care, but also any traumatic changes, life-changing incidents, admissions to hospital due to car accident victims, etc. You name it, or illness that really has a traumatic change to somebody's life. I think there is work around all that is yet really to be sort of fully unravelled, really. And I think the primary care networks that are evolving as we speak will be a key factor in that, which are obviously a range of our colleague professionals in the system. And I think there is absolutely a piece of work that we need to do on that. And it's something that I'll certainly highlight from this scrutiny to the Clinical and Practitioners Forum as how we can articulate a way forward.
I would support that, Chair. I'm happy to work with Mandy and with our teams to support the development of an offer, because strangely enough, it hasn't in quite that form come up before. There is a focus on supporting carers to plan for and respond to crises or emergencies, but again, that tends to be focused on people who already know that they're carers and planning for the future as to things that might happen, and doesn't really cover the circumstance you're describing.
Well, thank you. That's marvellous, and we'll hopefully get some sort of recommendation around that, if that's possible. Thank you. Right, does anyone have any further comments to make at this point? In which case, I will turn to the cabinet members for input.
Chair, I think Councillor Price was trying to make a comment.
Oh,
Barbara was as well.
Hello,
Price.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Sorry, who wants to go? Barbara Millman, did you wish to make?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think another point is that people are very surprised very often to find that carer services are free. They don't realise that they're not means tested. And there's often a big misunderstanding that if the person that you're caring for has to pay a contribution, then you will also pay a contribution. And sometimes I think that puts people off from actually wanting to have an assessment because they are afraid that it'll mean they have to pay more towards care.
That's an extremely good point. And I think it's something that the strategy goes some way to address. It's about getting the information and communication right, and to build trust. So thank you very much. That's a very good point. Councillor Price.
Hello. Yeah, I've been reading quite a bit of this. It's a lot to read. It's a can of worms, and a lot to discuss. But there's one part which I spoke to people just recently. It's employers not actually understanding the situation from their employees. They need time off, and it's happened on quite a few occasions. It's a bit of a concern. Be so cued into them, maybe their employee contract or something. I don't know. Just so that they have access to care for parents. Generally, parents. It seems to be the main thing. That's a concern of mine, amongst others.
Thank you, Councillor Price, and I think that's something that we may pick up on. There was an earlier conversation around that, and around looking and certainly working with our partners and business board and so on and so forth to raise that as a concern and to highlight it. Kat Hornsey.
Yeah, it was just to come back, carers assessments. I actually did speak to a number of parent carers, and I asked if anybody even knew that there was a carers assessment available, and actually overwhelming majority said they weren't even aware that these existed. Of all the people we spoke to, only 3 people had ever received them, and only one of those was for a child under the age of 18. I spoke to another parent, in fact, a couple of parents who have been turned down for assessments because apparently they've got too much help. And another parent who actually, even though being involved with social care, family support works, etc., when they actually asked for a care assessment, they were told that they actually had no idea and would have to get back to them about whether or not that was even possible. So I think there still needs to be quite a lot of work done around carers assessments for carers looking after those for children and young people. My only other thing really for the strategy is a lot of it is about carers seeking help, obviously that single point of contact, etc. There are a select number of carers who potentially will not seek help because of the nature of their caring. I myself have a child that is quite aggressive in nature, and I have been able to open up conversation with other carers who have children in the same kind of bracket, purely because I've said, this is my child, I understand, and they have then opened up and said, we want to speak to other people who get what we're on about, but they're too afraid to actually speak to a lot of helplines, etc., because they don't feel that they will be judged as parents, for their child who is doing something they can't help, but they're not doing it. Children, sometimes they're naughty, but that's a child. But the majority of time, these children are not doing it out of being naughty or anything else. They're doing it because they're trying to express an unmet need. And parents are just too scared to seek help because they feel judged. So it's really, really important that, when we have these single helplines, that they then are referred to other people who really can offer that support without judgment, who really understand. And I know, speak to a lot of other parent carers, they'd rather speak to other parent carers who understand their situation rather than speak to a generalized carer line who may not understand the smaller issues that actually lead to the bigger issues of the fact that they just need help and somebody to listen to them, but somebody who understands what they're trying to say, so they haven't got to keep on repeating themselves and all the small bits, because it makes it harder then to seek help.
Councillor, if I can come in.
Yes, if you would, Mr. Archibald.
Yes, I will do. So on the first point around assessments, I think it's fair to say, Kat, that the profile of the route or the pathway to carers assessments is lower profile in regard to children's services. There is, in fact, so in adult social care, we're led by the Care Act in relation to considering and responding to the need of carers for assessment. That doesn't necessarily mean that it always has to be a separate carers assessment, and quite often, you know, our teams find that the best outcomes for carers are achieved through a strengths-based or holistic assessment involving the carer. However, there is a right under the Care Act for an individual assessment as a carer, and there is a similar right parallel. Although the Care Act does not govern children's social care as such, there's a parallel right in the Children and Families Act 2014, I think, which creates the same kind of duty to assess carers' needs. We have previously had dialogue with Children's Services colleagues around this, and I'm happy, prompted by this discussion today, I'm very happy to raise that again with Children's Services, because I think it is something that the profile of that duty and opportunity for carers of children needs to be raised, and I think we can explore how we can ensure that that is offered as and when appropriate to carers, and particularly where they're actually asking for it, that the response is appropriate. So I'm happy to pick that up. We'll see how it might be reflected in the strategy, but outside the strategy, we'll pick it up and we'll try and come back to you, Kat, to clarify what we've been able to do in terms of raise awareness there. In terms of your second point about, you know, carers having concerns about talking openly about, you know, aspects of caring that may be sensitive, and you give an example of challenging behaviour by children, for example. I think that's understandable, but I think we would expect the services we commission for carers to be very aware and to expect those kind of inquiries and respond to them. And I think what we can do is to work with those carers and potentially to our partnership board to look at maybe a campaign to promote awareness and to encourage people who are dealing with these issues in their caring role to seek support. And it may well be that that support is in the form of signposting to a network, including your own network, where there are, you know, people with lived experience of caring in, you know, around these issues who can support. But we would expect commission service to deal sensitively and appropriately and not at all be fazed by that. So we can address that. And we can also talk about whether there's something we can do to raise awareness and encourage people to come forward and seek support where they're facing those kind of challenges.
Thank you very much, Mr. Archibald. Councillor Gandhi.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point. I mean, what Kat has said is really interesting, because before the lockdown, we had, as a Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee, we had intended to do some scrutiny work around young carers and parents looking after children and young people with various difficulties. But unfortunately, because of the lockdown, that was sort of put on hold. But I think that is a really interesting, well, not it's just an interesting point, it's a really challenging point. And I think both myself and Diana will want to pursue that as well, because I think that we have to make sure that parents who are looking after young people with challenging needs, that they are supported, that they do know what's available to them. They should be treated exactly the same way as adults who are caring for adults. We shouldn't have a situation where they feel, rightly or wrongly, they feel as though they're sort of second-class citizens. And I think that is, you know, something that Diana and I, and I'm sure Felicity as well, will take away from this and look into, because and I certainly would like a further opportunity to have a conversation with Kat about this, because, you know, I think it's a really important issue. We just need to make sure that from a children's directorate point of view, that we are offering the same sort of service to parents of who are caring for young people as adults are doing, because otherwise it's just not fair. Thank you.
Yes, completely agree. Councillor Norman.
Thank you. I'm happy to wait for my turn, if you like.
All right.
I don't know
in which case I will go to Mr. Stead and I will come straight back to you.
Thank you. Just one point that internally the council can help on with young carers is to ask or work with the education department to strongly encourage schools to have policies which support young carers. They have very different needs and they can be very disadvantaged. And some schools have extremely supportive policies and others don't. And I think any kind of encouragement that, for example, they allow kids who are carers to have mobile phones in the class when there is something going on at home that they're worried about, or to give them a safe space to make contact, or to give them somewhere they can do homework because home is too disruptive. And it's just to get them to look at these very positive, supportive policies, which can make such a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree. Consistency of approach would be helpful. I think if there's some means that we can communicate that to our education partners. So I'm now going to turn to Cabinet members, and I'll start with Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Right, well, I've got a whole raft of questions. I'll try and keep them short. Some of them are things that have been raised already, in fact, and various really worthwhile points being made. Do we know, how do we know the numbers of children who are carers? Do children know their carers? Those sort of issues are obviously very important. I just wanted to refer to what I have in front of me, which is a Young Carers report dated January 21. And it is interesting reading, and I wonder whether it could be perhaps attached or, you know, sort of shared with members along with this this strategy, because it does address some of the issues which have actually come up. For example, there is the Young Carer Support Service. There are 2 full-time family support workers who are going into schools, who are addressing other organisations to try and assist with understanding who a young carer might be, identifying them, supporting them, and so on. So there is that sort of work going on. Whether it's enough of it and whether it is actually reaching all the young carers is very much you know, a question we all need to ask. But there is quite a lot of information in there. For example, since 2018, I think I read 155 young people have been worked with. Currently, there are 32 young carers and their families who are specifically being worked with. And then we've got other issues which were brought up, like the relevance of financial security, numbers of free school meals, children, which all kind of connect, and the background to where our young carers are and their families is obviously a very important part of what we're doing and how we do it, and understanding whether or not we can actually specifically do anything about their financial situation, obviously. So there's a lot there. I also wonder whether there's scope for perhaps a joint scrutiny. I don't know, maybe that's beyond my remit, but I just throw it out there as, because so much has come up, you know, that weaves into this strategy that is specifically about young carers, and also about families, carers looking after children. It might be worth considering. A couple of questions specifically. One is about the whole transition from being a young carer, identified as a young carer, then there's a young adult, I believe, and then there is actually you become an adult, but you may still be caring. So quite how that works, I'd like to know a bit more about. And what was the other one was about, we have this point about having a board, a representing carers board, I can't remember what you called it. And is there a place for a young carer voice on that? And I don't quite know how you do it, but I think perhaps it should be there in some way. There is quite a lot in the report about consultation, about talking to young people, getting their views and their ideas and so on. So that's good and important. But perhaps the board itself might be worth. Right, there's probably a few other things, but that'll keep us going for a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Mandy Appleby, and I think Mr. Archibald's going to come in as well.
Hello, I just thought it might be helpful to come in now regarding legislation on a couple of those points. So as Ewan alluded to, the Children and Families Act 2014 does include young carers, as has been described. Also, that's the legislation that covers parents of people that need to be cared for. transitional arrangements move across to then the Care Act from the age of 16, we can then, as from an adult social care perspective under the Care Act, assess carers to ensure that transitional arrangements for young people that parents are caring, or indeed for young parents who are about to become adult carers, can then be taken into account, so that transitions to adult services can be undertaken as smoothly as possible. I thought it might be useful for you to understand that process.
Thank you. If I can add to that, so in keeping with that, the concept of young adult carers, which you'll see some reference to in the strategy, has deliberately been established in order to reflect that transitional process and to recognise that there's a sort of period where carers have become adults, but they're still dealing with the roles that they've had as children, and that role is still having, you know, significant impact on them in most cases, and recognizing that you don't just throw a switch and suddenly you're in a different world where you're an adult and you're caring, so it's fine. So that recognizes that we've done specific engagement with young adult carers, and we have some but not complete information about numbers and who those people are. So just to support what Mandy has said. More generally, you know, I understand the level of interest and focus and concern around young carers, and would emphasise, as Councillor Norman has done, you know, there has been a significant growth in the scope and the nature and the quality of the work that's done to support young carers during the life of the current strategy, which includes those specific roles within children's services, as Councillor Norman has mentioned, but also funding for the continuation and development of new support groups and networks for young carers. And so there has been an increase in the numbers of carers identified, the numbers of young carers supported, the ways in which they're supported. There clearly will remain those we don't know about, there will clearly remain unmet needs. But I would just offer further assurance that there's a lot going on in relation to young carers, and that will continue.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's good to know. So now I will go to Councillor Crockett, Cabinet Member Health and Adult Wellbeing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to thank the committee members and the experiential members today for such an interesting highlighting debate today. We've had a free debate, which is great, and it's highlighted some quite serious concerns, I think, and I think that that's all part of this committee's work, which is good to see. A couple of things from me that I think came out is about individual needs and not taking it as one size fits all. You know, we've got children and adults here, so that's a really important factor. The ease of access and information, that's another pretty straightforward thing that I think we should have got right in the first place. A single access point hopefully would be able to smooth that transition for anybody with any concerns. As you probably have alluded to already, Councillor Swinglehurst, there are many unpaid, unknown carers going on in the county and in the country, actually, and it was suggested approximately 21,000 were noted on the last census. So it will be really interesting to see how many come out in this next census, which is being concluded at the moment. But the downside to that is if the questionnaire really made it easy for people to identify that they were carers. I'm a bit like you. I'm a carer for my mother, and I just added up, and I'm with her at least 45 hours a week. So, you know, it's something that we do, and yeah, we have to know if there is and where the support is. I look forward to and welcome the committee's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crockett. So I have space in the agenda now for any further observations from our experts by experience, Health Watch. Is there anything that you wish to add, or you feel that the committee has not covered that you would like to raise at this point?
Not from me, thank you.
No, not from Ian. Okay. Kath, anything from you? No. Barbara, anything from you?
No, just that I've spoken to quite a lot of people caring for adults with mental health problems. And they say that they have difficulty in getting carers assessments. Mm. And recently at the MIR meeting, we had a presentation from the ART, which is the ART team, which is the first team that somebody is transferred to on the telephone if they're asking for help from social care. And some of them have said that they've answered various questions, but at the end, they haven't been referred for an assessment. And it rather bore, when this presentation came, it rather sounded that an initial kind of assessment is done over the telephone. And I did wonder whether, if that is classed as an assessment, or because from that, then the person is pointed in various directions, either signposted to sources of help or signposted to social care, as I understand it. Maybe I didn't understand the presentation, but it sounded as if there was this sort of initial assessment. And if the person didn't qualify in some way, they didn't get their carer's assessment. So I'm not sure about that, but it was just a worry that I had. And it, because in the MIR group, there are several people who either have relatives or who are caring for somebody with a mental health problem. This has come up more than once.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Mandy.
I'll talk through in short, the process. So the first part of that referral that you're talking to the adult advice and referral team part, it's called a contact assessment. It's not the Care Act assessment, but it's that first stage of somebody ringing our services, and it might be for a range of reasons. And through that process, there is a conversation, and it's again around that strengths-based conversation. And if we can, for whatever reason, answer queries and signpost people appropriately to meet whatever need it is that's being expressed during that initial conversation, then and we think that it's assessed that people's questions have been resolved by that contact, we wouldn't necessarily proceed with an assessment unless that the individual was saying, yes, that's what I want. It's actually a very, just as it is for a potential service user, an individual needing care for themselves, a carer's assessment as well has a very low threshold. So so there's no sort of difficulty generally if you're a carer in qualifying for a carer assessment if you should need one or want one. But we certainly wouldn't want to talk people out of having one if that's absolutely what they need and want. But those initial conversations, the aim is to try and connect people, as we've talked before, to the community, to aids and adaptations, to wherever it is we feel that their initial query lies. But regarding sort of mental health queries specifically, I think I'd like to take that back actually and look at our look at the numbers that are coming through for carers assessments of people who are caring for people with mental health, just to make sure that that we have covered off that learning wise. It could be that that we're not addressing those questions properly, and I certainly don't mind taking that back and making sure that we look at those, you know, those processes there specific to that group of people.
Thanks, Mandy. Can I just this conversation on the phone where you feel you've resolved the whatever the query is, does the conversation then go, are you satisfied that we have resolved?
Yes.
And would you wish to now have an assessment? I mean, in other words, do we offer the assessment, or do we wait for the person on the other end of the phone to say, I want an assessment? See, maybe that they don't even know that an assessment's something that they can have, or that, you know, that's the thing. Are we proactively sort of?
Yeah, I think I need to go back and sort of have a look at perhaps a selection of these cases, but absolutely we would offer an assessment. But also what we do where we haven't progressed, what is and where we have signposted people, we usually, our practice is that we create a letter that says this has been our conversation today, this has been what we've done. Should you need our any further advice and support or guidance or etc., please come back to us, so that it articulates the help and support that we've provided as per what the Care Act asks us to do regarding advice and guidance. We say what that is and invite people to come back if there's any change or they've got any further needs. So we try to cover both off, but I think it's always good. I mean, what we have, as some of you will know, we have a process where we have our external team to operations auditing our cases, and it's something that I can actually ask to be done to make sure that we have got things right.
If I can just add to that, I think it's important to recognise that carers are a diverse group of people from many backgrounds and with many outlooks on life, and there are different expectations and requirements in relation to assessment. So some people very much want an assessment of their own needs, and some carers will actively decline one if they can, because all that they're focused on is getting the needs of their cared for person met. And equally, whilst the Care Act creates the right for someone to have a carer's assessment if they want one, what it doesn't do is create a right to receive a service or any particular support or resources as a result of that assessment. So, and therefore it's also important that when, requesting an assessment, that people understand that they're getting the assessment, they're not necessarily getting any particular outcome as a result of that assessment, because it depends on what the discussion they then have with the professional who's conducting the assessment, what emerges from it, and the advice and the recommendations of the assessing professional. And I think people's understanding of all of that varies considerably. And I think there's been quite a lot of work done at the front door at ART, and also in wider networks to develop people's understanding of what those options are and what outcomes they produce. But people come at it with very different, I think, views and expectations.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald, and thank you, Councillor Bartlett, for your attendance. Yes, I think perhaps just something around that, checking that there is no not exactly an obstacle to assessment, but that the initial point of contact is not a triage for assessment, is what we're trying to sort of just establish. If you is that correct, Mandy?
Yes, it's advice and guidance. That's what it is, and then a decision as to whether it's necessary or needs to be progressed to a carer's assessment, because actually we may have met that carer's requirement right at the beginning.
Yeah, so there's is making no judgment at that point.
That's right.
That would not be appropriate. Okay, that's fantastic. Right, I don't think anyone else has any more to say right now. So the committee has been asked to consider the attached draft carer strategy for 2021 to 2026 from the Adults and Communities Directorate, and to determine any recommendations the committee wishes to make. So can I invite members to identify whether they wish to propose any recommendations? I will also go to Mr. Ball to see if he has captured anything from the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I've captured a few things which they may not be sufficient, or there may be too much I don't know, but you'll have to decide that. But shall I just share that on screen? You can see what I've got at the moment, and I'll read that out. So if you bear with me just 1 second while I just pull that up. Okay, so hopefully you can see some potential a list of information there. It might be a little bit small, so I'll read it out in any case. But essentially, the draft strategy be supported, particularly the level of consultation undertaken and planned, and the following be recommended to the executive. So A, the opportunities for liaison and identifying appropriate solutions for both the person being cared for and for the carer be endorsed. I think it's picking up on Ms. Milne's comments. That B, the consideration be given to specific approaches in terms of urgent crisis situations. That C, that attention be given to single points of contact, including trusted sources of information and linkages to services that support carers. D, that the strategy be shared with the council's partners and local business groups to raise awareness of the issues for carers who are also employees. E, that consideration be given to working with the Department for Work and Pensions to raise awareness of carer-specific needs. F, that the use of colour in the action plan be reviewed to make it clear that these do not relate to red, amber, green ratings. G, in view of the changed circumstances and the new strategy, the consideration be given to the carer support service to ensure that the service remains fit for purpose. H, that system partners be invited to consider improving experiences for carers in an integrated way across the system. And I, that the Adults and Communities Directorate and the Children and Families Directorate jointly review practices and processes to ensure consistency and support across all ages, including the advice and guidance provided on assessments. I'll just leave that up just for a moment for people just to digest, and then perhaps you can come back, and if there are any amendments, we can capture those before we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on the recommendations from members? And Mr. Archibald, yes.
Just on the first one, which came, I think, from Barbara Millman's comment, I think as phrased, it's very, very broad and could mean everything potentially. I think if I've understood Barbara's point, particularly, it's about coordination between any solutions being developed for the carer and the cared for, and that those are, dovetailed and linked in a way that makes them realizable. Whereas it's broader than that as currently phrased, I think. So if we can it's about coordinating timescales between the two, so that anything offered the carer is something they can actually take up.
So coordinated appropriateness as well, so taking their individual circumstances into account. Yeah. Can we tweak that a little bit, Mr. Ball, if that's possible? Did we have something around the point that was raised by Councillor Tillett about the sort of absence within the ICS and working with our health colleagues to embed it in their thinking?
In terms of what I put down for H was that the system partners be invited to consider improving the experience of carers in an integrated way across the system. I don't know if that fully reaches the, or whether you also want to make specific reference to the emerging integrated care system.
I think probably it might anchor it a little bit. It's not saying that I don't, I think what you've written is fine, but just sort of anchors it into something slightly more specific, which will make them go, oh, right, that's what they meant. Otherwise, it's a little bit a bit broad, a bit like the first one, it's a little bit too broad, if that's possible. Thank you. Councillor Summers. You're on mute, Councillor Summers. Councillor Summers,
I'm still on mute. I just noticed.
There you go.
Someone raised the school situation, I'm not sure we need to look at that a little bit more. As you know, I still have a problem that most carers, young people, don't know their carers. And somebody mentioned that perhaps the school would be the place to start a little bit more about that and look at that situation. Not sure how you could word it or what you would do with it, but I think that we need to recognize those young people probably sooner than we are. I know they're getting school meals, etc., but that's probably because they asked for it. And we need to make sure that, you know, a lot of them still don't know that they are being carers. They just do what they think they're supposed to do, and there is guilt attached to it. And I think maybe somewhere in the school, I think it was Ian raised that matter. I'm not sure if you can remember, Ian. If you could raise that again, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, I was asking really for encouragement for schools across the county to have young carer friendly policies because they desperately need support.
I'm happy to include something along those lines as a recommendation. Don't wish to be treading on the toes of children and young people scrutiny.
Chair, just to add, I'm sure it would be, it can only help to have it referenced, but if we could link it to the Young Carer Support Service, which is actually doing that, going into schools, and I'm sure there's always more to be done, so it'd be welcome to have the comment.
So yeah, we'll kind of support a consistent approach, something along those lines. Yeah, just to pop it up the flagpole there. Very good, thank you. Do you have any further comments? Can we have another look at the recommendations, Mr. Ball, please?
Yeah, thank you. Just taking a second, just to unfortunately, the systems are being a little bit slow, as I'm afraid today. Let me just pull that up on screen. There we go. So in terms of I've just changed the need for coordination on appropriate solutions for both the person being cared for and for the carer be highlighted in the strategy. There we go. And then I'm wondering whether or not, in terms of the area that you wanted to highlight in terms of children's services, whether or not we can incorporate something as part of in joint reviewing practices and processes to ensure consistent support, including the advice and guidance provided on assessments. I wonder if perhaps we could add something in there about in terms of identifying carers as part of the support that the service that the directors provide, or whether or not you do want it as a separate point.
I think it's going to have to be a separate point. I think it's good because it is kind of about, there are two elements to it. One is the identification of young carers, but the other is the point raised by Mr. Said, which is a consistent approach to making due allowance and having an awareness of the specific needs of young carers within an educational setting. Let me try to get a kind of consistent approach across the county, because it would appear to be a bit. Yeah. Councillor Norman, how's that? Is that? Sorry.
Right. I was going to say, I think anything we can do to ensure that this is done as widely. And
I would assume this will be taken up at some. Just
it'll add to what's happening, and the more we can do this, the better.
Making a mark. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mr. Ball.
Are you happy for me to take that down, Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. So those are our recommendations. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations? Proposer, Councillor Summers, seconded, Councillor Ironson. Thank you. I will ask committee members to vote on the recommendations by an electronic vote. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members be confirmed.
Chair, the voting number is now 5, and the recommendation should be, the poll should be on the screen.
Okay, thank you. So, committee members, please cast your vote either for, against, or abstain, and press submit.
Sorry, Jen, I'm still in the meeting and it's asked me for a vote.
Yes, I don't know what's happening here.
I haven't voted, obviously.
Yeah, you might want to just roll back on that, Jen, because I had one of your screens up on my screen at that point.
It's okay, Councillor Crockett, you shouldn't have the vote on your screen now.
No, it's gone now. It says it's end polling.
Oh, please don't press that.
No, I won't. I'm not touching anything.
Chair, can you see the voting poll?
I can't press submit on mine. It's
okay, I'll relaunch the poll if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that better? So 5 voting members.
Yeah.
Perfect. And those recommendations have been unanimously approved, Chair.
Splendid. We can have the non-voting attendees back in the meeting now, please. Thank you, Jan.
It must be your screen I'm seeing, Jen. I'm not touching it.
It is, but because you didn't disappear into the breakout room, I made you a co-host momentarily to do the poll, but you hopefully will go next time. Apologies, Chair.
That's right. Technology, it's brilliant, isn't it? So thank you all very much for that and for your contribution to that debate, and particularly to our experts by experience, giving so much of their time and helping us to debate the draft scrutiny, the draft strategy. But I'm now going to move on to agenda item number 8, which is the committee work programme. So the committee is asked to review the work programme as shown in agenda pages 62 and 63. In particular, the committee has been asked to confirm a meeting to be held on Friday, the 30th of April, 2021, to consider an item on mental health. So there are a few updates which I will draw members' attention to. Members will be aware that the temporary regulations which enabled online virtual meetings are due to cease on the 7th of May 2021, as the government's roadmap proposes that organised indoor meetings are permitted from 17th of May 2021. Can I suggest that the 10th of May 2021 meeting of this committee be rescheduled to a date during the week commencing 17th of May 2021? It is proposed that the Learning Disability Services item be moved from the May meeting to 21st of June 2021 meeting. It's hoped that this will enable the participation of experts by experience, and we can see from today how very valuable that is. It will also hopefully coincide with the start of Learning Disability Week. So just to let you all know that. It's also proposed that the update on the domestic abuse strategy be deferred from the June 2021 meeting until the autumn. And this is to enable focus on the changes arising from the domestic abuse bill, which seems to me to be a pragmatic and sensible thing to do. So as mentioned on agenda page 63, Vice Chairman and I have been discussing the possibility of undertaking a task and finish group on the health impact of the intensive poultry unit, the poultry industry. The timing will be dependent on the availability of public health and intelligence unit officers to progress it. Therefore, I would like to ask that a scoping statement be prepared for consideration by the committee. Do committee members or attending officers wish to comment on the work programme?
If I can just add briefly, Councillor, a bit of an explanation around the domestic abuse item and why we recommend that is pushed to the autumn. So as members will doubtless know, we have a new piece of legislation, the Domestic Abuse Act, which will become law in April. As is characteristic of the particular government department responsible for that act, we are only now receiving guidance on that act, and it is still in draft form, and there is a lot of to and fro still between local authorities, organisations such as the LGA, ADAS and others on the content of that guidance, and we're not sure when we'll get the final version. What we do know is that we're now being required to produce an updated, or in other areas new, strategy on domestic abuse, and currently the deadline for that is August. we have what we think is a pretty good functioning strategy that is, only slightly more than halfway through its life. But it will require some updating and re-editing and some additional material to reflect the requirements of the new Act. It seems sensible to make those changes and potentially, because it's only got a 3-year life at the moment, to roll it forward a further year subject to the approval of the executive, and then bring that updated strategy along with a report on the implementation so far in the light of the new legislation to you for consideration, perhaps in October, if you're willing.
Yes, I think that's very sensible. It doesn't make much sense to scrutinise and then have changes, and so I'm perfectly content to have that change in the work programme. Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Councillor Summers.
Yeah, Mr. Hart, can you hear me now? Yeah. Can you advise me? A couple of times now I've asked somebody about abuse. It's come back to me. Do we have the permission of the person that's being abused? And in a lot of cases, that's a difficult question. I'm not sure if that should be coming back to us. If we're making the recommendations that someone is being abused, I think it needs to be taken up rather than emails back and forth.
Can you just, sorry, you broke up a bit there, Councillor. I've missed some of what you said. Could you just confirm, to whom are you making these referrals or raising these concerns?
Actually, the last one I made to Amy, which may not have anything to do with this, but it's still an abuse situation that I had a complaint on.
Okay.
Sent the email. The email I got back was, do we have the person's permission to go there or to meet with them? Well, obviously, we can't get that permission if they're being abused. So, is there normal practice?
Sorry, Councillor Summers, can I suggest that you take this outside of the meeting and communicate with Mr. Archibald directly, if that's okay, because we're trying to set the work programme now, and that would be just doesn't seem to sit into this part of the meeting.
I just thought because you were talking about having something to do with abuse that it was. That's my fault.
Yeah, no, not at all.
If you'd like to email me, Councillor, I'll happily address your query.
No, it's all sorted now. It just, if it's
the answer would be that normally referrals should go to West Mercia Women's Aid or the police in most circumstances. If there's a child involved, then they may also go through the child safeguarding route and would be discussed at a MASH DA meeting. But I can provide more information on the pathways, but that's the most appropriate. If you think someone is experiencing abuse, those are the routes to go down rather than through individual officers of the council. That would be the general advice.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. And yeah, I mean, actually, perhaps that's something that might be shared to all members as to appropriate routes, perhaps. Mr. Ward, have we got the recommendations that we can display on the work programme for members to have a look at?
Yeah, certainly. Just bring that up now.
Just so we can all duly consider them.
Okay, so if you can see that, which is essentially that the additional meeting be arranged for the 30th of April to consider an item on mental health, that the 10th of May meeting be rescheduled to a date during the week commencing the 17th of May, that is likely to be a physical meeting the way things stand unless there's a change to the virtual regulations or an extension of that. That the item on learning disability services be considered at the 21st June meeting, and the item on domestic abuse strategy be considered a meeting in October 2021. The schedule of recommendations and responses appended to the report be noted. You've seen that we've made various recommendations to executive, principally on the budget recently, and those are just noted there. And that a scoping statement for a task and finish group on the health impact of the intensive poultry industry be prepared for consideration by the committee.
Thank you. So do you have any further comments? No. Can I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations? Proposer, Councillor Tillett, and seconder, Councillor Summers. Thank you both very much. I'll ask committee members to vote on the recommendations by an electronic vote. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members be confirmed. Thank you.
Chair, we have 5 voting members.
Marvellous. We have the voting screen.
And the voting screen should be up on your display. And those recommendations have been unanimously approved, Chair.
Good, thank you. We have non-voting attendees back in. Right, welcome back all. So it now only remains for me to say that the date of the next scheduled meeting is Friday, the 30th of April, 2021. I now formally close this meeting. Can I check with Democratic Services team that the live stream has been switched off?